Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Saleem Spindari.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Janice, for the introduction, and thank you very much for having me here. I'm here today to say some words before the screening of After Spring, and then we will have a really nice discussion. But for me, before I start that, I want to let you know that I work with refugees right now, but I was a refugee myself one time, so I have the experience of being able to support refugees while experiencing this at the same time. So the After Spring, which is a documentary that follows two refugee families in transition and aid workers who are fighting to keep the largest camp for Syrian refugees in Jordan running. I think for us it's really important to recognize that not only refugees are going through the transition, but it's the aid workers as well. So for us, I think it's a good idea to reflect of some of the things there. What makes people refugees? How conflicts start? I think that these are some of the questions that we should consider. Causes might be different, but the outcomes and devastations appear to be very similar in most cases. Innocent people who haven't done anything wrong flee their homes, their neighborhoods and communities to seek safety. Where? Mostly to nearby areas, and then they move further and further away until they reach a neighboring country. They seek safety, but flee towards the unknown. If you can think about leaving everything behind and settling in a new community, how that would look like. If you have resources with you, it's not like transitioning from one home to another, but it's a total new environment with nothing with you. And the neighboring country might not be even willing to accept you, so they would put all hurdles in making sure that you are contained and so that you don't cause any threat to them. But for you, what does that mean? You are leaving everything behind and everyone behind in your country, and now you are here. So most of the time when you flee, you could think of it as a journey for 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3 days, and then you want to go back to your country of origin because you didn't choose to leave, but you were forced to flee. Unfortunately, if you look back at some of the refugee camps around the world, it's staggering to see that some of the refugee camps become bigger, wide, empty spaces, and as you would see in the movie and in the documentary today, turned into maybe a village, a town, or even a city, like the case of Zatari camp, refugee camp in Jordan. And at the same time, if you look at other places, like Dadaab camp in Kenya, Somali refugees fled in 1990. They thought that it's going to be for 1 day or 2 days, maybe 10 days. And it's been years now and decades that they are still there. And it's becoming one of the biggest refugee camps around the world. And it's not only one individual, but generations who have born, they only knew the refugee life. So it's very difficult when you look at that. And then it's the same in the case of Rohingya refugees from Burma or Myanmar. Can you imagine this? Right now, around the world, we have close to 65 million people who are affected by conflicts there. 65 million. That's more than the population of Canada. And if you imagine all these people living in refugee camps or displaced areas, these are not only refugees. We are really creative in coming with really different words to describe them. We have displaced people, we have people who are asylum seekers, we have refugees, we have people of interest, we have stateless people. And where are they? Can you imagine? They are in the Middle East, they are in Asia, they are in Africa, they are in Europe, they are everywhere, pretty much in the Americas. Why they are doing this? What's happening? What's causing this? I think it's really important for you when you look at when you are watching the documentary. Please consider these things. focus on the life of some of the characters or some of the heroes in the documentary. What happened to little kids? What were they doing when the conflict started? What they are doing right now? Witnessing war and death, what will become of them? How can they cope with it? Now we'll move to adults. What were their living conditions before coming to the refugee camps or before becoming refugees? What were their sort of social networks that they had? What about now? If you look at women and their important role in connecting the family and keeping the fabric of the family together, who's supporting them right now and what their role had become? What about the teens growing up in refugee camps? No school. Now they're trying to act like men. But acting like men, is that what we want them to do? Is that how they will shape their life? They are the lost generation. They are growing up between barbed wires and surrounded by security and everybody else. And now what will happen to them? It's really important when we look at the life through the in this documentary to pay attention to the aid workers that are really working very hard, volunteers trying to be really creative in engaging the teens in conversation and discussion, but at the same time look at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee Workers, social workers who are local people who haven't had any experience in working with refugees. Now all of a sudden they are seeing themselves in the middle of the largest crisis, refugee crisis in this century. What is becoming of them and how their lives is shaped. The documentary team has been really creative in following members of the two refugee families, as you would see, and aid workers to document their life. The life in a camp, as I mentioned, that was a wide, empty space in a desert, and which has grown incredibly. After watching the documentary, put yourself in the place of the resilient individuals who are trying to normalize a life in a really not normal circumstances. Who can be a refugee? Any one of us? It happened to me at a time when I was a university student, thinking of how I would finish, graduate, and then establish my life. But all of a sudden, in a day, spring day in March, when it was pouring rain, we had to grab everything and walk 7 days to get to the border. And normally, under normal circumstances, I drive by car. It might take me an hour and a half to get there, but 7 days to walk and climb mountains in a really difficult circumstances. No, I was not prepared for it. Neither the refugees that you would see in the documentary, nor anybody else. So I think for us, these are some of the things to consider when watching the documentary, and I'm looking forward for our discussion after that. Enjoy watching the movie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saleem.